Hi, Ariade. Perfect. So, everyone, as you joining, so welcome everyone. So, my name is Dmitry Kapuk. I'm a director of Complex Trauma Institute, one of the partners this year's York Festival of Ideas. So, we're very pleased to be hosting this event, Festival of Ideas talk, Reflections on Fear and Love by Michael Gilding. So Michael Gilding is a psychotherapist with over 30 years of experience, one of the trainers at the Complex Trauma Institute, and he is a big advocate for making ideas on understanding trauma available to wider audience. So, Michael, let me give you the floor. So I'll welcome Michael.
Thanks, Dmitry, and hello everyone. A friend asked me, why are you giving this talk? And it made me really think. And my answer was that I'm very deeply disturbed by the state of the world. And in the face of what appears to be a growing wave of fear, I feel overwhelmed and powerless. However, my work as a therapist has given me some insight into the nature of fear and love, which I think is relevant to the current state of the world. So I'm offering this talk as my contribution to our struggle against fear. The lives of human beings are dominated by two powerful forces, fear and love. Fear and love are not abstract ideas. They are powerful biological systems that control our feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. Fear keeps us alive in the face of danger. Love enables us to survive by cooperating with others. When I use the word fear, I don't just mean feeling afraid. I'm referring to our body's automatic responses to external threat. When I use the word love, I don't just mean romantic love. I'm referring to our body's automatic responses which enable us to act as social beings. I'm going to describe these two forces, fear and love, and how they interact with each other. And I'll conclude with some thoughts on how we alter the balance between them. Because reducing the dominance of fear and increasing the influence of love within our own lives and in our society is a path away from misery and towards well-being. So what do I mean by fear? The natural world's a dangerous place, and we as human animals evolved from countless generations of creatures whose survival was dependent on their ability to avoid being caught and eaten by other creatures. The biological systems that enabled our primitive ancestors to survive such threats are still wired into our brains and our bodies and are part of our daily experience of life. When we sense a threat, our body instantly, automatically, and unconsciously reacts, making a number of physiological changes to help us to survive the threat. We experience three different types of reaction, depending on how close we sense the danger to be. And these different responses taken together are what I'm describing as the fear system. These three responses are fear alert, where the body prepares for action; fear arousal, where it generates the energy to escape danger; and fear collapse, where it shuts down in the face of inescapable danger. Fear alert is the state our body goes into when it senses danger at a distance. It's a state which prepares the body to respond to danger while we evaluate it. What is it? Where's it coming from? It helps us to scan the environment, and our nervous system becomes much more volatile so that we can switch immediately into the extreme action of fear arousal if we realize that this is a real threat. Fear alert is commonly known as the orienting response. An example of fear alert might be hearing a strange noise when you're alone in the house at night and you go really still and you hold your breath, trying to work out what's happening. Or entering a room full of strangers where you feel on edge and unsure whether this is going to be a good experience. We're frequently in fear alert when we're driving, as we have to be constantly alert to danger and ready to react quickly. And it's this volatile state that makes us so susceptible to road rage. Fear arousal is triggered when the danger is immediate and close. The predator leaps into action or someone attacks us, but there's still a chance of escape. It involves an increase in metabolic activity, which delivers a huge burst of energy, allowing a prey animal to run from or to fight off a predator. This response is commonly known as fight or flight, and it generates the energy we need to escape the danger. However, it can also result in a freeze with muscles locked, like a rabbit in a car's headlights, when an escape path is not clear. We might notice fear arousal in that sensation of an upwards rush of energy we get in our body when we lose our temper and go into a rage, or perhaps when we see a child running towards traffic. You'll know the freeze state if you've suddenly seized up trying to speak in public or at an interview, and your mind's gone blank. And you'll know it at near its worst if you've experienced a panic attack. We might notice fear arousal as a chronic state when we suffer from constant anxiety. Fear collapse is our body's oldest response to danger. It's triggered when the danger is so close that there appears to be no chance of escape. The body shuts down. There's a sudden collapse of energy production, which allows a prey animal to appear dead to a predator. Fear collapse is commonly known as the immobility response or tonic immobility. In humans, it's most commonly activated when a sense of terror is combined with feeling trapped. So it's often experienced when a person is raped. It may also be experienced in near-death situations, such as a car or a plane crash, or during a physical assault, such as a mugging. In less dramatic circumstances, we might experience the onset of fear collapse as a sudden sinking feeling, a heaviness in the stomach, a weakness in the legs, and a sense of dread. I think we're all familiar with a more chronic state of fear collapse in our experiences of low mood and depression. So to summarize, when I'm talking about fear, I'm referring to our biological fear system in its 3 stages. Fear alert, where the body prepares for action. Fear arousal, where it activates the energy to escape danger. And fear collapse, where it shuts down in the face of inescapable danger. If you'd like a more detailed account of our fear system, you can access my talk from last year's festival, Reflections on Fear, Anxiety and Depression, going on YouTube and searching under my name. The fear system in humans is activated not just by an immediate physical threat, as in predation, but also by social blows. As intensely social animals, we experience loss of connection as a serious threat, and the same fear responses with which we respond to physical attack are triggered by such things as being abandoned or ignored, by relationship breakup or bereavement, and by loss of status or position in society, and any sort of shame or humiliation. The fear system is highly functional for brief periods of activation, such as escaping from a predator or leaping a fence if a herd of cows turns on you. But it becomes less functional when it's activated over longer periods of time. It requires a place of safety to deactivate, and if there's no place of safety, it remains chronically active, and then the biological mechanisms that switch it off become impaired. This can result with us getting stuck in fear mode, which is a state of constant fear activation. And I think that most of the human race spend a considerable amount of time in this state. We get stuck in fear when we don't feel sufficiently safe in key areas of our life. Deadly illness and natural disasters have always stripped us of our sense of safety. But I think the harm we inflict on each other in the way we treat each other is perhaps the chief reason people don't feel safe and get stuck in fear mode. We don't feel safe when we're not given the care and attention we need as children. We don't feel safe when we're not paid enough to live on for the work we do. We don't feel safe when we're pressurized at work to produce more and we're constantly monitored and judged. We don't feel safe when those in power stir up hatred between different social groups. And on top of this, I think the internet revolution has given us intrinsically unsafe ways of communicating with each other. When we speak with someone face to face, there are natural biological mechanisms, which I'll touch on shortly, which restrain our fear responses. And these are lost in text exchanges, hence the prevalence of online abuse. Combined with the way social media platforms manipulate algorithms to monetize the spread of fear and hatred, this is ramping up levels of fear in society to an unexpected and worrying extent, and keeping us all stuck in fear. And all this is against a background in many industrial societies of the breakdown of communities. Too many of us are not connected to supportive communities, and this creates a profound lack of safety. When we don't feel safe, our fear responses continually activate, and they throw us into anxiety, rage, panic, low mood, depression, addictions, and relationship difficulties. These over time contribute to chronic physical illnesses, pain conditions, and fatigue. When we can't feel safe and are stuck in fear mode, we are stuck in misery. The antidote to this misery is love. Now, it's very difficult to keep our brains awake for long periods of time. So my talk's in 4 blocks, and between each one, we're going to have a little break, just 60 seconds just to move. If you have mobility problems, don't do anything I say, but just do whatever works for you to wake up the body and the brain. But if you don't have mobility problems, could I just invite you to stand, and then maybe just to sit and stand again a few times, just to get blood moving through the body again. And then maybe shift your balance from foot to foot, And then just to ease the tension in the lower back, just a little gentle twist for a couple of seconds. And then to get rid of tension in the shoulders, just give them a nice roll back for a bit and then a roll forward. Maybe ease your neck muscles by moving your head right round like this and maybe back the other way. Ooh, it's making me a bit giddy. Try another sit and stand for a moment. Okay. And if you sit down again, but what I find really helpful for waking the brain, if you've got specs, if you just move them, is give the face a really good rub. Just to get blood flowing in the face. Okay, we're ready to carry on to part 2. We've just looked at the human fear system and the misery that can be created when we get stuck in fear mode. And I claimed that the antidote to fear was love. But what do I mean by love? Strange as it may seem, love has its roots in the fear system. Long after the emergence of fear collapse and fear arousal, a further change took place in evolutionary terms in mammals alone, which created what the American psychologist Stephen Porges has called our social engagement system. This new biological system enabled previously solitary creatures to band together in the face of danger and to survive as a group far more effectively than as isolated individuals. This laid the foundations for social living and enabled the supportive and companionable mode of living that we call love. Social living, however, is a risky business. Bringing together in close proximity creatures with powerful threat response systems is a recipe for carnage. The fight part of flight-fight is actually a kill or be killed response. So for social living to be possible, powerful restraints on these fear impulses are necessary. The fact that so many of the countries of the world are currently blighted by warfare perhaps shows us that as a species we have not made as much progress in our evolution from solitary to social creatures as we might like to think. The social engagement system consists of the biological mechanisms for overriding both fear arousal and fear collapse. This makes social life possible, creating the conditions for cooperation in key tasks of survival, nurturing the young, the development of social and affectional bonds, and the development of knowledge and skills. Let's have a look at these mechanisms. Fear collapse, which shuts down the body when death seems imminent, is controlled in the brain by the amygdala and impacts the body via hormones and via the dorsal vagus nerve, which we see in this chart in red, which goes from the brainstem to all the major organs of the body. Fear arousal is also controlled by the amygdala and delivers a huge boost of energy to escape danger via a different set of hormones and via the sympathetic nervous system, which we see here in gold, going from the brainstem via the spine to all the major organs of the body. The social engagement system has its control center in the cortex, which is the newest part of the brain in evolutionary terms. It's shown here in blue. And it affects the body via the ventral vagus nerve, which is this part of it, which goes from the brainstem to the heart and the lungs. Now, the ventral vagus nerve is linked at the brainstem to the nerves that control the muscles of the face, neck, larynx, and inner ear, And these are used to signal safety or lack of safety between people. When we perceive that we are safe in social contexts, the signal on the ventral vagus nerve overrides the default fast setting of the heart's inbuilt pacemaker, the sinoatrial node. And this creates a restraining brake, slowing down our heart rate, calming us, and switching off our fear system. So what's happening in our body when the social engagement system activates? This starts with mirror neurons in our cortex responding to micro movements of the face and posture in other people. Mirror neurons are brain cells that can activate in our body the same physiological changes we might observe in another person. And this creates a sort of empathic connection which tells us if the other person is safe to be with. And if so, the control system for social engagement in the cortex is activated. It inhibits the amygdala, overriding its fear signaling. And that sends a signal via the ventral vagus nerve which calms our heart rate down. All of this creates a state where the cortex can be fully functional. We can be reflective in our thinking, we can be creative, and we can be sociable. All things that the fear system shuts down. Additionally, this social contact triggers the release of the hormone oxytocin, a powerful healing and bonding hormone. Let's look at how signaling safety works. If I meet a stranger and we're both in a fear alert state because we're suspicious of each other, we could very easily go into fight mode. However, if I smile, and it has to be a genuine smile, this is picked up by the mirror neurons in the stranger's brain, which prompts a mirroring smile. The nerves controlling the smile link to the ventral vagus, which sends a signal which slows the stranger's heart rate, creating a state of calm and switching off their fear system. And at the same time, the stranger's returning smile, picked up by my mirror neurons, strengthens the signal on my ventral vagus and helps me to move to a calm place. So what does it feel like when the social engagement system is activated? We experience it as a desire to be with others, an ability to meet and hold another person's gaze, a sense of interest in each other and a sense of connection, of belonging, a reduction of tension in the body. We relax, and an experience of vitality, an increase in energy and well-being. The social engagement system underpins our ability to be sociable or to love. The word love is used in many contexts, and the ancient Greeks had several different words for it, which covered the many ways in which we relate to each other. These include what we might now call romantic love, family love, friendship, playfulness, commitment, community love, and self-love. I'm going to structure my approach to love in a slightly different way, merging these ancient Greek concepts with attachment theory to come up with 5 areas of love. Our concepts of fear and love are based on the biology of the fear system and the social engagement system. However, fear and love are interconnected. The origins of love are in our infant cry when we're hungry or distressed. In other words, our care-seeking and the caregiving response this elicits. This is the first aspect of love. And I'm going to call this foundational love because everything else is built from this base. We start our life as infants and children, totally dependent on those who care for us. Our fear system is already fully developed when we're born, but we can't regulate our fear responses. And we need our parents or carers to calm our fears. Timely and empathic care makes us feel safe, and our fear system switches off. And when we've had someone responding to our needs and fears over time, this gradually teaches us how to calm ourselves. This is the foundation of our ability to love ourselves and others. But this care-seeking impulse is not just something for babies and infants. It's still a powerful instinct in adults. We have evolved and we're wired up in a way that prompts us to seek care from others when under threat. Even for adults, care-seeking is the most effective way of regulating fear. I remember a time when I was working for the NHS as a service manager, and my fear system was powerfully activated. I had threatened to write to the local newspaper unless a highly unethical service cut was reversed. And on several occasions I wondered if I'd overstepped the mark and was starting to feel panicky about risk of losing my job. And that would be quickly followed by a slump, just feeling sick and energyless. However, I did know something about seeking care. I had 3 very good friends on the management team who supported my actions. And every time I went into this fear state, I would just pick up the phone immediately and either ring one of them or go around to one of their rooms and let them know how I was feeling. And despite the power of these feelings of panic and collapse, every time, within a few minutes, I was able to calm down and get on with my work. It does matter, of course, who we turn to. Some people are unable to give us care. But when we get the right help, when we find someone who can listen to us and acknowledge our distress, then our fear system can switch off. We feel safe and connected. We can relax. And there's a huge surge of vitality when fear stops draining us of energy. Perhaps this is something you can recognize in your own lives. If you think of the people you turn to when you're upset, where you come away feeling so much better, lighter, more energized, and connected, as if you've had a reset. When we're the ones... Sorry, let me just go back. When we're the ones giving care, we're strongly affected by the distress of the care seeker, and we feel powerfully drawn to respond. This can be a deeply satisfying experience when we're feeling well, we have plenty of energy, and people are coming to us for care that we know we can give, and they're asking for it in a straightforward way. When we can see those we care for relaxing and recovering their energy and vitality, then even if we've been working really hard, we feel energized, connected, and useful. So the core or foundation of love, the place where it all started, is in the seeking and giving of care in response to threat. It arises out of the fear system, but it transcends the fear system, switching off our fear responses and bringing us to a place of safety where life opens out into many possibilities, different aspects of love. We absolutely know in our bodies when our care-seeking and caregiving are effective because we feel lighter, connected, and energized. Moving beyond the fear system, the second area I want to look at, self-love, sounds as if it's the opposite of social engagement. However, it developed as a result of receiving love from others, which enables us to love ourselves and others. So it's very much part of our social engagement system. The calming and supportive voices of our early carers become internalized as calming and supportive inner voices, which can counter self-attacking and undermining thoughts. Self-love is shown in investing time and effort into looking after ourselves physically. It's expressed in such things as care for our home environment, making it comfortable, supportive, and enlivening. It includes an adequate self-defense, such as not overworking, being able to set boundaries and protect ourselves, being able to express anger or opposition, while still meeting our opponents as persons, not enemies. There's much giving and receiving of love outside of the context of fear or threat. This is our third aspect of social engagement, which we might simply call affection. We see it within immediate families, between sexual partners, and between friends, when we just enjoy being with each other, when we rub along comfortably together, exchange words or tokens of affection. We listen and are supportive of each other. There are frequent small acts of kindness, affirmation, or service. Over time, this develops into a sense of commitment, which can form a secure foundation for a sense of belonging and well-being, which gives meaning to our lives. When we feel safe, relationships between adults are equal, supportive, and companionable. And these attributes are like the hallmark by which we can recognize love. Our fourth area of social engagement is being able to play and to share our interests with others. Taking part in sports, games, hobbies, pastimes, and even academic interests. We find it in all sorts of clubs, in book groups, choirs, allotment communities, many other activities. These can be groups where we play, encourage each other, have fun, or learn new skills and expand our knowledge and understanding. When we feel safe with the people with whom we share our interests, this greatly enhances our life and gives us a real sense of joy, connectedness, and vitality. I get a huge amount of pleasure from being a member of the Red Goat Climbing Wall in York. I'm down there several times a week, working out with friends how to do new climbs, talking a lot, drinking coffee, playing table football. It's my playground. I'm known there. I feel I belong, and it adds enormously to my enjoyment of life. The fifth area of social engagement or love that I want to mention is community love, our involvement in and commitment to our wider society. This could include a whole range of things, from trying to be a good neighbour, volunteering our time and work for others, political involvement to improve the lot of others. It can cover small things like not littering, or greeting those we meet in the street. I do notice when I'm out walking, my spirits lift when someone says hello to me, or my greeting or smile is returned. In societies where the social engagement system, rather than fear, is dominant, there is more equality, greater tolerance of difference, and usually a well-functioning social security system providing an overall sense of safety that basic needs can be met. An example of a country like this might be Denmark, which uses income from high taxation to fund such things as free higher education and at-home carers for the elderly. An example of a policy that could contribute towards making a society less fearful and more socially engaged is universal basic income, which research has indicated helps recipients to feel more secure, improves mental health, gives people space to find more fulfilling work, and encourages volunteering and entrepreneurship. So we've been going on for a bit, and it's time for another break just to wake the body up. So could I invite you just to move around in your own way or follow me? Just sort of sitting down and standing up, and then shifting balance between your feet. A little bit of a twist to ease the lower back. Rolling your shoulders forwards and backwards, and then rolling the head right down, right back, just getting the neck muscles relieved of tension a bit. And then maybe a little bit of sitting and standing. And then, before we start, if you want to move your specs up, just give your face a nice rub, just to waken up the eyes. Okay, and we're back. We've just looked at the social engagement system, the biological system underpinning love, and how we experience it in different areas of our lives when it switches off our fear responses. I now want to look at ways in which the fear system disables our ability to love when we get chronically stuck in fear mode, when we can't switch our fear off. I'm going to focus on 3 changes triggered by the fear system which most impact our ability to relate to others. The first of these is that in both fear arousal and fear collapse, our brain releases powerful natural painkillers, endorphins and other hormones, which numb both physical pain and emotional distress. When these painkillers are released by the brain, we lose our empathic connection to others. Empathy is the ability to sense what another person is feeling, to put ourselves into their shoes. And we can do this because our bodies naturally resonate with another person's, picking up on their feelings. But this only works when we can sense what's happening in our own body. When our brain releases painkillers, this connection with another person is cut, empathy is lost, and with it, the compassion that prompts us to offer care. When I was younger, I seemed to have an ability to take major blows or losses in a very stoical way. They didn't affect me as much as I expected them to, and I would worry that there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't feeling what I thought I should be feeling. Looking back now, I see that it wasn't that I didn't have feelings, but they were numbed whenever a loss or a blow to the self triggered my fear system. It meant that I didn't feel the full pain and distress of the blow or the loss, but it cut me off from everyone and left me isolated. The second of these changes occurs in fear arousal, when our brain's threat center, the amygdala, hijacks and restricts the workings of the cortex, the newest part of our brain that controls our capacity to think and to relate to each other. This means that the cortex can only focus on escaping danger. Everything else goes out of the window. In this state, we can't listen to each other or think and reflect together. It's as if we've got a defensive shield round our head and it deflects away everything that's said to us. Nothing goes in, everything is battered away. An example of this would be when you're annoyed with your partner or a friend and you get into one of those silly arguments over who's right or wrong about something. Both of you get more and more annoyed and more stubborn, and no one's giving in. Nothing is resolved when we remain in fear arousal. However, a couple of hours later, when both of you have calmed down, you might actually see that the other one had a point. Perhaps. This intense focus on danger is a paranoid state which sees danger everywhere. And in this state, even a partner or a friend can be experienced as a threat, and we can find ourselves responding to them in an aggressive manner. The third change happens when we go into fear collapse, where our brain cells become de-energized as our body is being starved of oxygen and glucose. Here, the impact on our ability to relate is even more fundamental than it is in fear arousal. The control systems in the cortex which enable us to relate socially are disabled. We lose the ability to pick up and make sense of those micro movements of facial muscles or the slight changes in posture and tone of voice which let us know whether someone is safe to be with or not. Also in this state, the muscles that control the correct tension of the eardrum start to fail, and it means we can no longer pick out the human voice from background noises, so we can't hear properly what's said to us. It's as if the cord that connects us to others is severed. What we notice is that we no longer want to be with others. We want to withdraw. So we go into ourselves. We can be in a room full of people, but we're isolated. With this in mind, I want to go back to the 5 areas of love that I mentioned before and consider what happens when the fear system infiltrates these areas and starts shutting down our capacity to love. This infiltration of fear has the most profound impact in the context of foundational love, our seeking and giving care in the face of danger or distress. Our ability to seek care will be impaired if our life was dominated by fear when we were young. Early lack of caregiving undermines our ability to regulate fear. For example, if our parents were anxious, depressed, overwhelmed, unsupported, and not able to regulate their own fear responses, we won't have got our needs met or had our fears calmed. So we stay trapped in fear and don't learn to self-calm. If our fears and needs were responded to by angry attack or being ignored, we would probably conclude that there was something wrong with us. We may now be deterred from seeking care, feel that people won't want to bother with us, that they'll be too busy, and then we're ashamed of our need and too afraid to ask for help. We will be prone to seeing any potential caregiver as a danger, someone with power over us, power to disappoint or hurt us as we were hurt in the past. So we might avoid them or fight them, try to belittle them or rubbish their care, or try to control and manipulate them. What this does, of course, is to trigger a fear response in people who might be able to help us and make it very difficult for them to respond to our need. Another result of not getting the care we needed when we were young is that we might now choose caregivers who are unable to help us because it's what we're used to. So perversely, we feel safer with these people than with others who could give us care. Perhaps if you think about your own life now, there may be people that you turn to for help who don't listen properly, or who judge or blame you for your difficulties, or who just end up talking about their own problems, and you come away feeling even worse. When we're the ones giving care, our ability to do this can be shut down by fear responses arising from several sources. Our fear responses may be triggered by the powerful fear reactions of those seeking our care. They may react to us as someone who could disappoint, humiliate, or coerce them. So they might clam up, or not respond to our questions, or insult and disparage us, or ask for help in a demanding way, and trying to control us, or threaten to make complaints about us. We then sense them as a threat, and we lose our empathic connection, and both care seeker and caregiver are left feeling rubbish, trapped in their fear responses. On the other hand, our own past trauma can be triggered by the care seeker and shut us down as a caregiver. I worked with a woman who had loved being a mother to her 4-year-old daughter, but who had suddenly become depressed and unable to cope with looking after her. It turned out that when she had been 4, her mother had been hospitalised for a number of months, and she'd been sent away to a relative for that time and had been deeply distressed. Her 4-year-old daughter's vulnerability and need for her care had touched the forgotten memories of her own need and vulnerability at that same age and awakened her old trauma, throwing her into a fear collapse and shutting her down as a caregiver to her own daughter. There might be a problem that we're struggling with too many demands on our care and becoming exhausted. Many years ago, my wife Fran and I had twin girls, our first children. We were very committed to their care and to being responsive to their needs. But for the first 2 years, one of them didn't sleep at night. And we would be up trying to settle her. 6 times on a good night, 18 times on a really bad one. Both babies would wake up every day bright and ready for action at 5 a.m. So we coped by having one of us take the night shift and the other one the early morning shift. The night shift was exhausting, and we wouldn't have a drop of care left to give. So we had a murder clause in our shift agreement. If things got so bad that we were going to murder the baby that couldn't sleep, we were able to wake the person on the morning shift and ask them to take over. Much more recently, I had a similar experience of the limits to caregiving, which carried echoes of this early experience. I was working almost full-time in private practice. And one day I had had a number of difficult sessions which had really drained me. I was desperate to get to the end of the day and get a glass of wine and sit down and watch some mind-numbing TV. I finally got to the end of my work, but then I noticed a message on my phone from my elderly mother who lived nearby and was needing more and more help from me. She couldn't get her oven to work, and she hadn't been able to eat. My heart sank. I didn't know how long this was going to take, and I was absolutely exhausted. I dragged myself round to her house, and as I walked, I had a really strange fantasy. I imagined seeing a baby just left by the side of the road. And I imagined that as I walked past it, I just kicked it into the gutter. This mental image really shocked me, but it showed me very clearly how my instinct to care and my compassion had been totally disabled when the demands on my care pushed me well beyond the limits of my energy. In this situation, the person needing our care becomes an existential threat, and in response to that level of threat, we simply cease to be social creatures. We don't become a bad person, we just become a switched off person or a temporarily burnt out person. Professional caregivers such as doctors, nurses, psychological therapists, carers for the elderly and disabled, social workers, teachers and many others need to pay real attention to the limits to the care they can give, particularly if they face other caregiving demands outside of their working role. One thing is clear. We absolutely know if we haven't been able to meet the care seeker's need because we feel heavy, tired, frustrated, and often really distressed. Moving on to self-love. Where our early life was dominated by fear and we didn't get the care we needed, our present-day internal voices often reflect the way we were treated in the past. And we can be prone to self-critical and self-attacking thoughts which distress and collapse us. We will tend to treat ourselves as we were previously treated, neglect our physical health, put little energy into making our home environment more comfortable and supportive. And our ability to self-defend may be impaired. Either we may be unable to control our anger, so we generate hostility in others, or if anger was beaten out of us when we were little, we may now be unable to access our anger and therefore fail to hold boundaries and stand up for ourselves. Turning to affection. If we can't regulate our fear responses, or our friends or sexual partners also can't, the social engagement system gets shut down. Our relationships become unequal, unsupportive, and hostile. The other person becomes a threat, and in response, we withdraw or argue, fight, or seek to control the other. In intimate relationships, we see this on a continuum from constant bickering and petty meanness, creating low-grade misery, through volatile relationships with noisy fighting as each partner tries to dominate and control the other, right up to relationships in which one partner dominates through violence or coercion and the other is terrified into submission. In playful and exploratory love, where we play and share our passions and interests with like-minded people, the arousal of fear can also shut down social engagement, and we can feel excluded and unsupportive, and we may well lose our enthusiasm for that particular interest. If we or the people we share our interests with can't regulate our fear responses, competition replaces friendship, with rivalry, envy, sulking, disparaging comments, bullying, or ignoring others or being ignored. For example, in a book group, one person showing off extensive literary knowledge might be making themselves feel superior, but this is at the expense of other members who might start to feel inadequate and scared to share their views. In an interest-sharing group, one person can destroy the sense of safety for everyone if they start to gossip about other members behind their back and no one challenges this. Others may join in because they're scared of exclusion and try to keep a sense of belonging by joining in the gossip. But this is a false sense of belonging, based on fear. Everyone knows that a person that denigrates someone who's not there can just as easily speak in the same way about you when you leave the room. In our communities and in the wider society we live in, the infiltration of fear has a profound effect. Disputes with neighbours can completely destroy the sense of safety we have in our own home. Workplaces can trap us in fear. If the workplace culture is fear-driven, it will have the same patterns of dominance and submission that we see in fearful relationships, and our work will be stressful and exhausting. At present in the UK, those most in need of financial support have to endure the stress of a social security system that has been deliberately turned into a hostile environment. So those most trapped in fear have their fear compounded when they seek help. this destruction of a vital safety net leaves us all feeling less safe. Human beings have lived in many sorts of society, starting with hunter-gatherer communities which were essentially equal, where land was not owned and resources were shared. But throughout recorded history, fear has been endemic in most societies. Whether in agrarian societies with wide inequalities between aristocracy and those who worked the land, in tyrannical regimes where lives hang on the whim of a despot and no one is safe, or in industrial societies where those with wealth and power take a disproportionate share of the joint enterprise of business, leaving the majority in a state of financial insecurity. I think we're presently seeing a rise of fear in our world, at least the part of the world I know. Fear is a state of isolation, destructive of social living. It's a me only, not us state. In the fear state, we respond to difference of any kind with hatred and aggression. We cling to possessions and wealth without sharing them, and we lose compassion for those who can't access the means to live through illness, age, or disability. This feels unsafe for all of us. Those with disproportionate wealth fear those without it, and those with nothing fear for their very survival. So, we're nearly there. One more part to go. Let's just take another break where we just move the body a bit and wake up the brain. So if you're able to follow me, maybe stand and sit a few times just to get the blood flowing through the body again. Just shift your balance a bit. Ease up the lower back. Just some gentle twisting. Take away the tension of the shoulders by giving them a good roll backwards and roll forwards. Ease the neck just by rotating the head right round. And another couple of sits and stands. And maybe even a stretch right up. Okay, and then as we sit down again, just removing our specs and just giving the face really good rub. We're nearly there. We've looked at ways in which the activation of the fear system can shut down our ability to love and relate socially. And as I've said, it feels as if we're living in a time when fear is rising. What can we do in the face of this? I can think of no more important task than trying to help shift the balance between whether fear or love dominates in our own lives and in the society that we belong to. The social engagement system allows us to function fully as human beings by fostering cooperation, connection, our ability to think reflectively and creatively, and to play. It brings with it an increase in energy and vitality. The fear system, when we're stuck in it, turns us into isolated beings, bringing emotional turbulence, energy drain, chronic ill health, and general misery. With fear rising in many places throughout the world at an alarming pace, shifting the balance between the two seems a daunting task. I can only answer the question of what we can do about this for myself. In this struggle, each of us faces different challenges and has different gifts and different areas of influence. I think, however, that understanding how the biological systems of fear and love work and interact can provide a conceptual framework for different approaches, helping to illuminate the path ahead. For me, this understanding indicates 4 key principles. Firstly, that we recognize and accept our own fear responses. Secondly, that we learn to regulate those fear responses. Thirdly, that we try to understand the fear that's driving those we find problematic or hostile. And fourthly, that in all our dealings with others, we act in a way that promotes safety rather than provoking more fear. Unsurprisingly, there's little here that's new. Nothing that hasn't been known in ancient traditions of wisdom and spirituality for thousands of years, and constantly lost and found and lost again. I think the first step towards moving away from the dominance of fear is recognizing and accepting it in ourselves. As we've seen, our ancient fear responses come from a time before social cooperation. These are kill or be killed, aggressive responses, me-only responses. The socialized part of us sees them as selfish, uncaring, and violent, and often wants to disavow them. That's not me. It's too hard to accept. We don't want to look at what we see as the nasty part of ourselves. This nasty part is usually our retaliatory impulse. If someone hurts or scares us, we want to scare or hurt them back. When I'm on my bike and a car cuts in front of me and nearly knocks me off, I have an impulse to hurl a brick through the rear windscreen. I don't do it because I can control my impulse. And also, I don't carry a brick for that purpose, but I do fantasize about it. We might think we're a bad person because of our retaliatory impulses, but these are simply our thoughts and fantasies expressing the body's unconscious impulses. It's just one of the ways that we notice that our fear system is activated. Our retaliatory impulses are neither good nor bad. They are simply information. They tell us there's a threat and that we're angry. They tell us something needs to be addressed. In the example I gave earlier with my daughter who kept disturbing my sleep, the threat of sleep deprivation triggered the retaliatory impulse of wanting to hurl her back onto the bed. But that was just information. My caregiving tank was completely empty. It just meant that it was time to wake up my wife to take over. When we don't recognize and accept our own fear responses and try to disavow them, we lose an integrated sense of ourselves. The nasty parts we don't accept get projected onto others. We dump them onto someone else, criticize those people, and label them as bad. So now we feel good, but we're deluding ourselves. As a young man new to senior management in Royal Mail, I felt completely out of my depth and my fear system was constantly activated. I deeply hated an older member of the senior management team. I thought he was ruthless and he ruled through fear. But I was puzzled why I hated him so much. And eventually I realized that he was displaying something I hadn't wanted to look at in myself. In order to survive, I was behaving ruthlessly and managing in a way that provoked fear. My hatred was my projection onto this other manager of what I didn't want to know about myself. Recognizing my fear responses as belonging to me was the first step in changing my whole approach to management. It also got rid of the hatred because I was able to see my fellow manager as someone just like me trying to survive in a fear-driven organization. Once we can notice our fear responses and accept them as part of who we are, we can start to regulate them so they're not out of control. I'm not going to go into the details of this here because much of my previous year's talk, which can be accessed on YouTube, focused on this issue. Fear regulation is a complex matter and a lifelong task involving self-care, seeking care from others, regular physical exercise, ways of alleviating chronic tension, regular calming practices such as meditation, yoga, singing, breathworks, sharing our interests with others, and spending time in nature. Perhaps the most important of these is getting better at seeking care from others. It might be worth reflecting how many people we have in our life who we can turn to when we're feeling upset or anxious. I'm talking about people with whom we don't have to put on a front or pretend we're fine when we're not. People who properly listen to us and people who understand us, who get us. Some of us may be blessed with good friends. We should treasure them. But if we're not, it can help just to be aware of that lack in our lives and to be open to making new friends or reconnecting with old ones. Of course, friendship is two-way, and a shift in focus from who will be my friend to who needs my friendship can open up new possibilities. Having become more aware of our own fear system and being better able to regulate our fear responses then opens up the possibility of being more aware and more understanding of other people's fear responses. This is what happened to me in that example I've just given with my fellow manager, who I stopped hating once I'd understood that he was just as fearful as I was. Say if you're talking to your partner or a friend and we sense they're not paying attention, we might take it as a personal slight and get angry and upset and accuse them. You're not listening to me. It might, however, be that they're in a depressive slump or a dissociated state, a mild form of fear collapse, and they've lost their social connection. We need to be aware that others may be unable to hear or take in what we're saying. To my shame, I can recall a number of occasions in the past in my work as a therapist where I got irritated that clients had no recollection whatsoever of my really helpful interventions in previous session. Looking back, it's clear to me that they'd lost their ability to socially connect, to hear and to process what was said, and I hadn't understood what was going on, and therefore hadn't helped them to regulate and reconnect. When we realize what's happening, it helps us not to take things so personally and get upset. We might just think how to bring them back into connection. Might just need sitting quietly alongside or holding their hand. Going back to the example of the petty argument we might have got into as to who's right or wrong about something, if we can notice our own fear state, we can then understand the state that the other person is in. In a heated argument, we would then know that hammering away at convincing the other is going to get nowhere. The only thing that works is indicators of safety, such as lowering our voice, backing off, making space. In other words, de-escalating rather than pressing the point. When we can understand that someone is trapped in a powerful state where their ability to connect and act socially is paralyzed, it helps us to see them as a person, not as an enemy. This understanding also helps us to see how we might best respond to those in fear. And I'm not here going to consider the extreme cases where aggression needs to be stopped and contained by meeting it with equal force, such as law enforcement or even resisting the invasion of one's country. My focus is on how each of us can contribute to reducing the growing forces of fear and hatred day by day in the world. The key to countering fear is promoting safety. One of Aesop's fables, The Tale of the North Wind and the Sun, tells us of a competition between those two as to which was strongest. They decided to see who could get the cloak off a passing traveller. The north wind blew and blasted the traveller, but he only wrapped his cloak more tightly round him. Then the sun gently warmed him, and after a time the traveller shed his cloak. I think of the cloak as the shield that the fear system throws up, that blocks all thinking and lets nothing in. An assault on the shield gets nowhere. It just gets stronger. The cloak is wrapped more tightly. But the sun's gentle warming is like what happens when we meet fear with safety. The guard is relaxed. The cloak comes off. Only safety switches off our fear responses. The lessons of history give us many examples of the opposite approach. There have been many revolutions against unjust regimes, fueled by laudable progressive ideas of freedom and equality. But revolutionaries often end up demonizing and killing their opponents, as in the early stages of the French Revolution or in the Russian Revolution, and they themselves then generate regimes of terror. Tsarist terror was replaced by Stalinist terror. When fear is met with fear, it creates more fear. The more gradual revolution of our current times, fighting to create a fairer society for all and overcome sexism, racism, and all sorts of discrimination, now seems to have created a backlash which poses a threat to all this progress. The governmental rollback of civil rights in the USA, or the network of websites and online communities promoting misogyny to young men and boys, known as the manosphere, are particularly chilling aspects of this. However, it's perhaps necessary for progressive movements to look at their own fear responses that may have played a part in fueling this backlash. Progressive views, as they gain more acceptance in society, have at times been advocated and implemented with fear-driven behaviours such as intolerance, zealotry, and uncontrolled anger. Those who raise challenges to what becomes accepted thinking can face social media lynch mobs aimed at destroying their careers. Academics are hounded out of university posts for sexist comments, which deserve rebuke, but not annihilation. This is not the warming sun that persuades people to change, but perhaps more the north wind. And it's created a climate where many are frightened of speaking spontaneously for fear of offending others, and many perhaps leap too readily into outrage. The wisdom of Aesop is entirely consistent with the lessons we learn from examining the biological systems of fear and love. And these lessons correspond with messages of non-violence and non-retaliation from the major religious, spiritual, and humanistic traditions of the world, such as the concept of turning the other cheek. This is not submission, but breaking the cycle of violence, changing the direction of the flow of energy. And this brings me to the theme of this year's Festival of Ideas, making waves. We are facing a wave of fear that threatens to tear apart our already fragile social fabric. And we need to create a wave of love flowing in the opposite direction. As isolated individuals, the task is daunting and overwhelming. But there are many of us. Every small action that each of us takes to make the world a safer place for others, acts of welcome, of kindness, of generosity, of sharing resources, which includes not trying to avoid our financial contribution to society, acts of service and non-retaliation, of refusing to demonize or dehumanize our opponents. Every bit of energy we expend to promote a sense of safety for everyone we have dealings with is like the energy of the wind transferring into the surface of the water and creating ripples. Each of us makes ripples every day, whether we're aware of it or not, affecting all those we come into contact with. And all these ripples can join together to make waves. Let's support each other and focus our energy in the direction of helping others to feel safe, in the direction of love rather than fear, so that we together can make the waves that change our world for the better. Thank you for listening.
Great. I hope you can see lots of reactions. Michael, yeah?
Thank you, everyone.
Brilliant.
Thank you for your support.
We have questions, Michael. So Q&A. But for everyone, I want to post feedback form, so please don't go anyway. Stay for questions. And also, don't go without feedback form. So I just post it. So if you get a complete feedback form, then you will receive certificate. So are you okay to read?
Okay, yes, just looking at the questions. We have, for autistic folk, holding gaze can be difficult. Does this mean the social engagement system is harder to reach? I think yes. One of the issues to do with autism is to do with parts of the social engagement system. In fact, Porges reckons there's a number of parts of the social engagement system that aren't working as effectively as they might. So it is harder to reach, and people with autism are, I think, more subject to fear. In terms of the way that sounds around, might make us react more than we would otherwise. So yes, I think that's entirely correct. We have a question: what to do if we lean too much on others to soothe our fear, and eventually they cannot give us the care as they're burnt out from giving? How can we self-care? That's a really good question. I suppose I sort of talked in polarities about there's people that can give us care and there's people that can't give us care. But actually, most of us can give care, but then sometimes can't give care. If we're tired or ill, or we've got stresses, or we've got anxieties and health worries, then we become much worse at caregiving. And I think one of the big things is actually just to hold on to the fact that there's nothing wrong with seeking care, and there's nothing wrong with need. And the fact that someone can't meet your need doesn't mean there's something wrong with it. And sometimes we just have to accept that our friends are our friends, but they have limits as we have limits. And just allow them a bit of slack and allow ourselves a bit of slack, and just see who we can find to help look after us. So I have a question: does exercise, and hence the release of endorphins, result in immediate temporary loss of empathy? No. I don't understand half as much as I would want to understand about endorphins, but I'm talking about the particular particular painkillers that actually numb our responses. When we exercise, what we're actually doing is we're stimulating our sympathetic nervous system in a non-fear environment. And what that does is, because the systems are always balancing all the time, it's actually stimulating the calming system, the ventral vagus system, which is actually strengthening our ability to contain ourselves and therefore being able to be in connection and have empathy. Okay, let's look at the next one. My son suffered through years of bullying in several schools throughout his childhood and teenage years. He became totally isolated, with not a friend in the world. He missed out on many normal social experiences. He's now a young adult, able to be in a job that's somewhat social, which is great, but friendships still seem out of reach, and he won't talk about any of it. I think he holds a lot of, I'm not sure, is it a nightmare? Due to the repeated rejection and abuse. Any advice on how, as a parent, I can best support him? I mostly just show him love and acceptance. Oh, that's really difficult. That's really difficult. And I think it underlines how there's no easy and quick fixes here. And a lot of the stuff, where things are advertised as quick fixes and we can sort you out in 6 sessions, are fraudulent. It's very difficult, and each person is different. You're probably better placed than anyone to know just what works for your son, rather than being any generic answers there. But we never know what happens in the future and what doors might open. I've worked with people that have been for ages without friends, and then just something changes in their life and they come across someone and they can make a contact and something new happens. So all I would say is, don't give up hope. I'm sorry I can't be more useful to you there. When you mentioned, this is Rebecca's asking, when you mentioned your client being triggered by their daughter, was she able to move past this, and how? What work did you carry out? I work at a rape crisis centre and previously a domestic abuse service, and we would often have mothers triggered by their children due to children looking like, acting like, facial expressions like of the perpetrator. With this client, let me just try to think, because it was quite a time ago. Actually, once we'd worked out what had caused the collapse, then that didn't actually take too long. I was working in a way which is called focusing oriented, where when you're talking about a trauma and someone's talking about the impact it has on their body, it might be like, it's like a knot in my stomach. And I would just sit with them and encourage them to focus all their attention on the knot. And I would ask very simple questions about it. What's it like? Its size, whatever, its tension. And it's like meditation, but carried out with 2 people in a way, and also much slower. And with that sort of work, you can get in touch with the bodies and release tensions in the body. And it wasn't many weeks of work after that realization we came to about why the collapse had been triggered. That she started to feel a lot better and started to pull herself out of the depression. And also she got in touch with her anger about being sent away and things not being explained to her, and that reinvigorated her, enlivened her, and got her out of the depression. Thank you. So what's the next one?
Sylvia. Mm-hmm.
Yes. How to act as a former victim who doesn't have a lot of close connections and who struggles in self-disentangling, or finding a therapist who is able to create trust and safety and opening. Finding a therapist is a big question. the one thing I would say there, I mean, yes, in terms of friendships, sometimes where we can be without friends for a time, and you never know when you're going to come across someone who could be a friend. But if you're looking for therapy, which is sometimes a good way when you don't feel you have anything to fall back on, it's a matter of finding someone you can trust, because some therapists won't be able to help you and some will really be able to help you. All I would say is try contacting a few people. Look at their adverts. There's something called Counselling Directory, which usually contains a lot of detail that people have written about themselves. You get a gut sense from reading that detail, I think. And if your gut sense gives you a sense of, oh, I like that person, I'm drawn towards that person, then trust it. And then meet up for a first session and follow your gut. If you don't feel comfortable and you don't feel safe, then go for someone else. But if you actually feel safe, if you feel relaxed, if you feel, this person gets me, then you might have found the person that you need. So we've got another one. In cases of panic attacks, you often don't know the threat. How can you still try to work on your fear system? That's a very good question. Not just panic attacks, loads of things. You know, a smell in the air, a piece of music you haven't heard for 20 years can trigger a fear arousal or a fear collapse, and you wouldn't have a clue as to knowing what had caused it. So in a sense, it's just, yes, I am in that state. I am in fear arousal, or I am in fear collapse. What to do about it? And that's where things like regulation and breath work and the like help. But these things don't change you and don't give you what you need instantly. It's not a simple answer. It's as if you want to become a champion weightlifter. You go down the gym for 5 minutes a week and then nothing happens. You know, you need to go down the gym several times a week and work for several hours a week. You know, so things like regular physical exercise, you know, at least 30 minutes walk a day, these sort of core things. Look at my talk, the first talk on YouTube. There's a lot about regulation, but it's very complicated. It's not a simple thing. There's no one pill that sorts everyone. What can you do when others give you care, but the feeling of safety is only momentary? Well, yes, the feeling of safety usually only lasts until the next danger. And if we live in unsafe places, and if we're in unsafe workplaces or the like, then yes, we'll be back in fear again, and we just have to go through the whole thing again. But sometimes we have to step back from it. You know, say in your workplace, if you're in a workplace and you're constantly in fear, you might have to think, is this a place for me? And make changes in your life to work in a place where it's more comfortable and people look after each other more than the place you currently are. Now then, we're just about out of time. I'll just take one more question. But can I say, if you have a question there and I haven't been able to get round to it, I'm very open to correspondence. And I think Dimitri will put my correspondence email address, michael.gilding@gmail.com, on the chat. And do get in touch with me if you'd like an answer. So let me just look at the last one. How does this apply to relationships with someone using coercive control? I work with mothers who experience coercive control from their partners and have to co-parent with them post-separation. It's particularly difficult when children are caught in the middle. They have to continuously experience fear. I think the key point there is the fear system cannot switch off, and you can't actually start the therapeutic work that you might do between a therapist and a client, or even the support of friendship when people are not safe. So when people are in unsafe places, our job is to try to help them to get out of unsafe places. Try to find a place of safety. It's, therapy isn't magic. What friends can do isn't magic. We have to be safe, or our fear system doesn't switch off. So I'm afraid we've got to the end of our time there. Do get in touch with me. Thank you very much for giving me the time to talk to you. And thank you very much for all the hearts and the claps and that. Very much appreciate your support. Thank you so much.
Lots of responses. I wish you could read them now, but I'll send you them.
Thank you, Dmitry.
Thank you. Wonderful.